The rain had been falling all morning, not the soft, poetic drizzle that lovers walk through, but a cold, merciless downpour that turned the streets of downtown Chicago into rivers of gray. Cars rousseaued, bespraying muddy water onto the sidewalks. People hurried under umbrellas, heads down, desperate to reach somewhere dry. But one boy didn't move. He stood barefoot near the marble steps of the Anderson Medical Center, a threadbare hoodie clinging to his shivering frame. His jeans were torn at the knees, and the cardboard box beside him sagged under the weight of soaked bills, and coins hardly enough for a meal. His name was Eli, and he was 12. For weeks, he'd been living on these streets, sleeping under bridges, eating from trash cans, and trying to keep his spirits alive with the one thing he loved most: dance. Even as thunder rolled overhead, Eli danced. Not for money, not for attention, but for someone he couldn't even see yet. He danced because it was the only thing that made him feel whole. The only language he had to speak to a world that had forgotten him. Now, through the towering glass windows of the hospital, in room 312, sat a little girl named Sophie Bennett. She was 9. Her golden hair fell like sunlight over her pale shoulders. Once a lively child who loved to twirl in pink dresses, Sophie had lost the ability to walk after a tragic car accident 6 months earlier. Since then, she hadn't smiled. Her father, Ethan Bennett, one of Chicago's most powerful billionaires, would have given every dollar he owned to see that smile again. He had built companies, skyscrapers, and empires, but nothing could rebuild his daughter's broken spirit. Ethan had tried everything: the best doctors, world-renowned therapists, private music sessions, even a clown who charged more than some lawyers. Nothing worked. Sophie just stared out her hospital window all day, her world confined to 4 walls, watching the real world move while she remained perfectly still. Until that morning, as the rain poured and the city blurred behind the glass, Sophie's tired eyes caught sight of something below a boy. He was spinning, flipping, and dancing barefoot on the wet pavement. His movements were clumsy, but alive, filled with a kind of freedom she hadn't seen in months. He leapt into puddles, letting the water splash around him as if the storm itself was part of his performance. His face was a mixture of concentration and pure, unadulterated joy. And for the first time in forever, a small sound escaped Sophie's lips. It was a giggle. Nurse Clara, who was tidying up the room, turned, startled. "Did you just laugh, sweetheart?" Sophia nodded, her eyes bright and fixed on the scene below. "He's dancing. In the rain. Daddy." Ethan had just entered the room, looking exhausted from a morning meeting. He followed her gaze, and what he saw nearly broke his heart. A boy, clearly homeless, drenched and trembling, was dancing his heart out in the middle of a storm. Each move was imperfect, but so sincere. Ethan frowned. What's he doing here? He felt a familiar surge of protective anger. Was this boy trying to solicit money from sick people? Maybe he's performing for tips, Clara suggested gently. But as Ethan looked closer, he noticed the boy wasn't facing the crowd. He wasn't even looking at the passing cars. He was facing the window, facing Sophia. He was performing for an audience of 1. And then something unbelievable happened. Something that felt like a miracle. Sophie, who hadn't shown an interest in anything for half a year, lifted her frail hand and waved. Down on the street, The boy noticed, and he smiled the widest, most genuine smile Ethan had ever seen. He twirled again, this time slower, more deliberate, like he was dancing for her alone. A private show, just for the girl in the window. Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. He felt a lump form in his throat. His daughter, his precious Sophie, hadn't smiled in months. And now T-Stranger. This barefoot boy from the streets had somehow done what all the wealth in the world could not. He couldn't explain why, but a powerful instinct took over. Etho rushed downstairs, past the front desk, ignoring the confused looks from the staff. He had to talk to that boy. When he reached the hospital entrance, Eli was still there, spinning clumsily, his soaked shoes squeaking against the pavement. He looked exhausted, but he kept going. "Hey!" Ethan shouted through the rain. "Boy, what are you doing?" Eli froze mid-step, his eyes wide with fear. "Hi, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean any trouble. I just saw the little girl." She looked sad. His voice was small, almost lost in the sound of the downpour. Ethan's anger melted instantly, replaced by a wave of astonishment and humility. "You were dancing for her?" Eli nodded, wiping rain from his face with a cold hand. "Yeah. I used to dance for my little sister when she got sick. It always made her laugh. I thought maybe it'd work again." For a long moment, Ethan couldn't speak. The boy's raw sincerity cut deeper than any charity speech or corporate promise he'd ever heard. This wasn't about money or attention. It was about kindness. Simple, pure, human kindness. "What's your name?" Ethan asked softly, his voice full of emotion. "Eli." "Well, Eli," Ethan said, his voice cracking slightly. "You just made my daughter smile, and that's worth more than you can imagine." Eli's lips trembled. A flicker of hope crossed his face. Is she okay?" "She's trying," Ethan replied, looking back up at the window of room 312. "Would you like to meet her?" The boy's eyes widened in disbelief. "Really?" Ethan nodded. "Really." As they walked inside, the nurses and staff whispered a billionaire in a bespoke suit, escorting a dripping, barefoot boy through the pristine hospital halls. But Ethan didn't care about appearances anymore. Something inside him had shifted. The walls he had built around his heart had been washed away by a simple dance in the rain. Neither he nor Eli knew that this one small act, a moment of connection between a boy with nothing and a girl who had lost everything, would soon change both of their lives forever. Thank you so much for watching. This story is a beautiful reminder that the greatest gifts often come from the heart, not the wallet. We'll see you in the next video.